Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Reza, your host today. Guys, I'm so happy I finally completed my 100-kilometer ride, and it was amazing. There is a trail here in Nova Scotia called BLT, and I went 50 kilometers down that trail and come back, and that was amazing, beautiful view. If you're into cycling, I'll put my Strava link below in the description. Follow me. Anyhow, in this video, I'm going to talk about functions. Functions are an important topic in C programming. But what are functions? Functions are basically blocks of codes that we wanted to execute. The main reason we use function is we don't want it to duplicate our code. We don't want to copy paste our code and make it a messy code. We want our code to be clean and easy to read. Imagine you're inverting matrices and you're writing a code that needs inverting 100 different matrices. So in your main function, you would go ahead and copy paste the code for inverting a matrix 100 times. That would not be efficient. I rather write a function that takes a matrix as an input and returns the inverted matrix. This way, I can use that function 100 times in my code, but the code block that inverts a matrix stays the same for all 100 different functions. The other benefit the function has is you can modify your code. For example, you wrote the function for inverting matrices, you used it 100 times, or you copy pasted 100 times, and now you understand that you want to change something. It's not working as it should be. It's a nightmare going through 100 copy of that and modify every individual copy. If you use function, you have a code block that inverts matrix. If you modify that, the whole code would be modified. So why not using functions? Suppose I want to multiply two numbers together and we want to write a function which does that. The first thing is to know the return value. In this case, I'm going to multiply two integer numbers, then the return value would be integer. Then we need to name the function. In this case, I would name it multiply. Now you have a clear sense that what do I mean by putting the integer keyword beside the main function. Of course, it doesn't need to be integer. It could be anything. It could be double or float or any type. So any type you specify here, the function will return a variable of that type, a value of that type. So let's bring it back to integer. This function is going to take two integers, int var1 and int var2. And in the body of the function, it will return the product of var1 and var2 in semicolon. You don't have to have input variables. You can get rid of the input variables, and then I can hard code the product of 8 and 9. So this function is an integer function, which means it returns an integer value, and this function will only return the product of 8 and 9, which is 72. You could also write a function that doesn't have a return value. We call them void. You have to have this void keyword before the function name, and inside the body of the function you don't need to return anything. For example, you can print the product of 8 and 9 is %d, and product of 8 and 9, close parentheses, semicolon. So this function would just log the product of 8 and 9 is 72 on the screen. Void functions doesn't need to have a return statement because they don't need to return anything. We wanted to do an operation. For example, in this case, we wanted to just log something on the screen, and that's it. When you don't have any input argument, it is a common practice, and I highly recommend it, to put void keyword between the parentheses. It means that you don't want to read any input in this function. Of course, if you don't put keyword, your code is still working and there is no warning. But this keyword, putting void between the parentheses, will make your code cleaner, a lot easier to read. Let's go back to the function we had that took two integer values, var1 and var2, and returned the product of var1 and var2. Calling a function in the main function is easy. So let me go to the main function. I'll create an integer. I'll name it result. This integer is going to hold the return value of the multiply function. So I'll call the multiply function here, and as an input parameters, as you can see, Visual Studio's prompt me that you want to enter two integer. Now you're entering var1. So var1, I'm going to enter 2, and for var2, I'm going to enter 3 and semicolon. Okay, so let's debug this code. I'll put a breaking point at line 9, and let's hit F5 to debug this code. Okay, so you see that result hasn't been initialized yet. It's has the negative 85 million value. I wanted to show you one other button here in the debug menu. There is a button called step into, or F11. If you press step into, now we're in the function. Now we can execute the function line by line and study the function. So at the beginning of the function, you see that two variables are here, your two local variables in this function, which are var1 and var2. If I step over and go to the return value, you'd see that the var1 and var2 are initialized with the numbers I provided here in the main function. The first one will go to var1 and the second one will go to var2. If I step over the return value, multiply the product of var1 and var2 will be calculated and will be returned from the function. But we are at the end of the function. If I step over, we'll go back to the main function and the return value would be shown. Okay, as you can see, I'm back in the main function now, and multiply returned is 6, but the still result is not initialized. The reason is, you remember that this yellow arrow means that this line number 9 hasn't been executed yet. If it's been executed, the right-hand side will be assigned to the left-hand side, and the value 6 will be assigned to result. If I step over, you would see the result is 6. Right now, the result is 6. It means our function works. This is how you call a function. Okay, let's get out of the debug mode and clear the breaking point. Now imagine we wanted to print the result. Printf, the result is %d, and I want to print the variable result. Okay, amazing. Let's Control F5 to see if the code is working. Yes, let me put /n here. So this goes to the next line, Control F5. Okay, the result is 6, which is what we were looking for. Imagine I want to do this a couple times in my code. So I would do it now, this time 4 times 5, and this time 7 times 2, for example. Okay, so if I compile and run this code, you see the error, because the variable result is being repeated. Let's change it to result 2 and result 3. Okay, this should work now. Okay, but there is a problem. The result is 6, the result is 6, but 4 times 5 is 20. 7 times 2 is 14. And if you catch my error is I changed this to result 2, I changed this to result 3, but I forgot to change this to result 2 and change this one to result 3 as well. And this can happen in your code a lot. This is the reason we use function. We are doing a similar instruction 3 times in our main function. So why not add another integer function? Let's call it multiply and log. This function takes two integer var1 and integer var2. This function will call the multiply function. So int result equals to var1 equals to, multiply, calling the multiply function, var1 and var2, and then print f the result is %d, of course, / \n, we need it here, and after the we put the argument, which is result. Okay, you see, in this function doesn't return anything, so we don't need to have it as integer. I'll change the type of the function to void because this function doesn't return anything. And now, instead of these 3 lines, I can change it to multiply and log, and I don't need a variable here. And I can get rid of this line as well. Same thing for this line. And the same thing here. Okay, now this code, if I compile and run it, you'll see that everything is corrected. The result is 6, the result is 20, and the result is 14 is being printed. So each time you see that you are repeating some instructions in your code, that instruction better to be a function. It will make your job much easier, and it will make the job of your user or someone who wants to use your code, when they're reading it, it will make it much easier to follow your code. It will make your code much cleaner. I want to talk to you about another topic as well, and that is the lifetime of those variables. So one thing is important here is you know that what is this result and where you can access it, and what is the lifetime of this variable result inside my multiply and log function. So what happens if I say result times 2, let's store it in another variable, int result 2 equals to result times 2. Okay, as you can see immediately, Visual Studio is showing me an error, and the error is identifier result is undefined. But we have int result here. Why do I get this error? It means that you have to declare your variables inside the scope. The only variables I can use inside this scope, by scope I mean the space between the curly brackets. The only variables I can use between these curly brackets are the variables that has already been defined in this scope. I haven't defined any result in this scope. The reason is, whenever we reach the end of a scope, C compiler will destroy the variables that has been defined in that scope. We talked about it in for loop, and it's more important here because in line 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, int var1 is being created, int var2 is being created, result is being created, and all of them will die whenever we reach line 12. They won't exist in the main function. You need to be careful about that. So if I delete this line, let me compile and run the code. I'll put a breaking point here. This time, let's debug it. Now let's step to the function f11. Now we're here. If I step over, you would see that we have 3 different variables in local here. If I step over, we will have the multiply return, which is here. We have the result. We have var1 and we have var2. Okay, I'll step over. The printf function returned and result is 6 and var1 and var2. Perfect. Now that I'm stepping over the line 12 and line 16 in the main function has been executed. There is no variable here. What does it mean? It means that var1, var2, and result were created at line 8 and deleted by line 12. They don't exist in your program. If I step over, it would be a new var1, a new var2, and a new result variable. And they will be different. You want this function because you want this functionality in C compiler. You want your variables to be deleted after you use them in a function, because if C compiler doesn't delete it for you, we will have 3 different var1 variables in our code. We will lose track of them. And this way, we'll make our job much easier. We don't need to track of all the variables. So C will take care of it, will clean the code for us. This time, if I step over, now all the 3 variables are cleaned, they're destroyed, and I'm clean to call the function again and use the function again. This concludes our video regarding functions. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed it. Have a great day and see you in the next episode.